time of year where all districts who are members of ARNIU 28 are asked to approve their budget. So attached to the agenda, and I have extra copies if anybody wants to see it, but it has been attached to the agenda. I didn't want to print out a pile of copies for how much is there. But it is their 24-25 budget. And every district, again, is asked. Our member share, the $159,000 that we directly contribute to ARNIU, is not going up. It can fluctuate a little bit every year. There's a couple different factors that go into that to divide up kind of the amount that they ask for from all their districts. But ours should be somewhere around $159,000. I did review the packet. Nothing absolutely jumps out at me as out of the ordinary. I don't know, Dr. Rigg, if you...
No, it looks good.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that kind of jumped out at me as
Either.
kind of out of the ordinary or exception, but we do have to take a formal vote. All the board members' votes that get tallied up as to whether their general fund budget is approved. And we're just talking about the general fund. We're not talking, general fund is probably a smaller part of their budget, overall budget. Between special ed and everything else that they do, they certainly run a large organization over there. But the districts, again, are just asked to approve the general fund budget.
Okay. Very good. Chris, any questions? Doug?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, so we'll recommend that we approve that tonight. So we have just the one motion.
Yep, there's a motion out there. There's no setting tax rates or anything like we do for our budget.
Right.
It's just approving their budget, and then we'll send something back to Aaron, and he will fill out that shows who voted for it.
Okay, and Sue has no objection. Point that out.
And that's just a vote. You take all the number of votes. It's not by school, it's by overall numbers.
Yes, I believe, if I remember in my IU days, I think it's the total number of board members.
And we had an audit meeting the other night, and they got a very clean, good audit report, so.
Okay, good. Next is the library funding request, Joe.
Well, Mr. Howard also talk about it because he's been talking to some community members about it. But every year, as part of our normal budget, we approve or have been approving an $11,000 donation to the Indiana County Free Library. They have in the past asked for an additional $4,000. I know we talked about it maybe a year or two ago. There was no action taken on it at the time. They are again asking for the additional $4,000 to make the total donation $15,000. And we said we would bring it here to Audit and Finance for discussion.
Yeah, like everyone, they're struggling with the finances. The cost of everything goes up, and the money that they have on hand isn't meeting it anymore. So they've asked us to increase our contribution. It's definitely something we support. I mean, they're a good partner. They've always been a good partner. They work with us in a variety of ways and different programs in the summer and with our pre-K students. So if we can afford it, I absolutely would support this increase. We have not increased it in some time. It's not anything that's crazy or too high. So if it's something we can support, and I support it, but we got to make sure we can pay for it too.
Do other school districts give? I'm just curious because I don't remember from a discussion a few years ago that we had about this. Are we the only one? I know it's White Township collects something.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know.
I think Indiana's the only one because they're the only ones that other districts are allowed to use it, but I think it's mainly Indiana school district that uses it.
Yeah, I can check and find out and get back to you.
It's not a motion tonight. I'd like to help them if we can. I'm curious if White Township's also going to give a little bit of an increase. I'd like to find out. Personally, I'd like to know that.
Well, and the borough as well. The borough that's where it's located in too. So it'd be interesting to see if what percent of what they've given in the last several years.
Yeah.
Maybe Quintina can check on that. Isn't she our rep now?
She is.
Maybe she can.
Yeah, we can get that information. Let me. So we want to find out how much the borough's given, how much White Township's given, if any other school districts contribute.
And if they've asked for the same amount. In other words,
Okay.
If we're the only, I can't imagine we're the only one being asked, but.
No, I hope not, but I can verify. I'm trying to see.
Okay, thank you. Chris, anything?
I'll pull in Mr. Harley, just for everyone's enjoyment, because I know you missed him.
What?
So,
I'm sorry, Billy, I didn't hear what you said.
Do you have any comments about the library request?
No, I love what Doug just brought up, because that's one of the things I was thinking about too. Like, how are the other organizations within our town supporting them? The only thing I was going to ask, Rob, is it commonplace from what you've seen? Do you see in communities, school districts helping support fund the libraries? I don't know the answer to the question.
I don't know that I can answer that question. I know when I was at Greater Johnstown, we definitely partnered with the library, but I don't remember ever giving a contribution to that library. But they also, I don't think so. I don't think that Johnstown contributed. So, not that I'm aware of, sir.
Well, it's a wonderful resource. I love it. I'm in there all the time, but I think we have to go about this a little more.
For sure.
I don't know how the library is set up. Is it a countywide system? Like, are there branch
It
offices
is.
in Blairsville, anywhere else, or does that one stand by
I think
itself?
it's stand by itself, yeah.
Yeah, but it is the Indiana County Free Library, right? It's not the Indiana.
Why, they just say Indiana Free Library.
Right.
I've never heard them use the word county, it's just Indiana Free Library.
So, yeah. let
Because
me
I
find
think,
out.
I think at one time, I thought, didn't Blairsville used to have a library down in their town at one time? Because I believe Armstrong Tanning has one, I believe, yeah.
Where's in Eastern Indiana?
Nicktown never had one.
Okay, so we'll wait until we hear a little bit more about that.
Okay.
So then we're going to go on to our non-agenda items. Oh, this is always fun. Jared, the budget projection.
There are two different projections in front of you, in the packet there. I don't want to go into too great a detail tonight, as I just finished putting this together the middle of last week, kind of the first draft of the budget. Rob and I still really need to sit down and take a look at it. My plan is in our April audit and finance to really try and just commit that whole committee meeting to the budget, where I bring you guys a lot more information. But I wanted to get this into your hands and in front of you as soon as possible too, just so you have time to start to digest it. The first page, as always, is kind of a summary of what the budget looks like. And I also as well have an estimate in here for the current school year, the 23-24. When we passed our 23-24 budget, we were projecting a little over $4 million deficit. My estimate right now is showing a $655,000 deficit, which is significantly has kind of closed that gap a little bit, as we typically do when you're looking at our budgets. And there are a variety of reasons for that: increases in revenue, decrease not using all the expenditures that we have budgeted for. And again, I don't want to go, you certainly can ask any questions you have, but again, I don't want to go into too great a detail tonight, because I really do want to commit April to pretty much going deep or diving deep into this budget, the 24-25 budget. Hopefully that $655,000 can be erased as we get closer and closer to June 30th. But I think we're not going to hit that $4 million deficit either. So that's some pretty good news for 23-24.
Do you expect are you expecting to make any significant changes between now and the end of April
To
this proposed budget?
the 24-25 proposed budget, not that, I mean, I'm going to go through it a couple more times between now and April. Like I said, Mr. Heinrich and I need to go through it and have some conversations about it, but I don't see anything that's majorly going to change between now and then. As you can see, the 24-25 budget is projecting a $6.1 million deficit. And that is really attributed to a couple different things. Our real estate taxes are flat, if not decreasing. We are in the process of I don't want to call them major appeals, but we have kind of got hit in the past month or two with a slew of just smaller student rental properties who are appealing. And this Mr. Repack is certainly working through those with the county as well as with the borough and White Township where those buildings are located. So our real estate taxes are pretty much flat, if not slightly decreasing going into next year at the current tax rate. Because our overall assessed value is decreasing and it's projected to decrease.
That's been the problem for several years. Let me ask you a question about the banks or National Bank, not National, I'm saying NBOC still. First Commonwealth is, gave that building up downtown here. And I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that's about, what did you project, 12?
It's about $12,000, yes.
Every year. So I would hope, what's the plan for who's going to make the decision about how the settlement will work on these taxes?
From what I've read, is there's going to be some type of payment in lieu of taxes agreement, which ultimately this board needs to approve. So we should be at the table of that discussion.
Absolutely. I don't think somebody else should be sitting at the negotiating table. I mean, the commissioners want to sit there, but I think that we need to be at the table too, not just looking at an approval up or down vote. I think that we need to make sure that happens.
And I did send an email to Byron Stoffer, who I think is involved in that process, just to say, hey, we would like to be like to be involved in that agreement, as we should, because you, as the 9 board members, ultimately need to approve that, because it is an agreement that we all now. We don't have a whole lot of say in it because it's the other organization who's saying, here's what we are willing to give. But if you ultimately have to prove it, you should have a voice at the table. So
I think also we might want to do a little bit of research to find out how many years most districts would look at and across the state. Is it 3 years, 4 years, 5 years?
Well, I mean, we operate a couple different payment in lieu of taxes, and they are, there is no end to them until they are revised. So. Which has happened a couple of times. We have a couple with some IUP, not directly with IUP, with some IUP affiliates, as well as IRMC.
So questions, anybody? Doug, Chris, any questions about the projected 24-25 budget at this point that you want to know about?
Yeah, Jared, I was going to ask you, what would that look like? Or can you help paint a picture for me, the payment in lieu of taxes? Like what's that look like?
Well, generally, it's in lieu of anything, foreclosure, deed in lieu. We have to come to us. We're the party that's out of luck here. We're losing tax revenue, and over a decade that adds up. 5 years it adds up. So they stated in the paper that they were going to. The commissioners were going to meet and work something out with the county office about what the district would what the bank would owe on county taxes and, in fact, real estate taxes, and how we're going to work that out. And I think we have to pay particularly close attention to these things because we need the dollars. I mean, here's the library coming in and asking for a little bit of extra money. It all counts at this point without the ESSER funding coming in. So I think it's going to be probably a meeting, probably at the assessor's office. I doubt it will be a hearing, but I would imagine at least one of the commissioners would be present. And then I think the bank will probably obviously have somebody present. They're looking not to pay as much, and we're looking to get as much as we can.
But basically, they agree on an amount.
Yes.
So I think, Chris, answering your question, it's basically a set amount that it won't be millage, it's going to be X dollars that will be given in lieu of the normal tax.
Correct. And at the chamber, sorry.
Yeah, because I'd have to think, they're going to fix up FCP, at least in the bottom, and put a branch in there. So, does that raise the value of that building potentially and help us negate, some of the loss that we're talking about losing?
I don't think that's part of the formula.
That's not.
I don't
say
believe
that
that's
again,
part of the
Chris.
formula, no.
Well, I know they're looking to upgrade FCP. They're putting the branch down below at the bottom of FCP Place is where the branch will move to from 6th Street. So I was just wondering, would they reassess and look at the FCP building if they do some enhancements and additions and stuff like that to it?
Well, any party can appeal that. We can appeal that.
They'd have to add on and all that, but there's not a lot of room to add on to that building unless it goes up.
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to be, it may come up in the conversation, but we need to know if it does. Conceivably, that building could be assessed for more, but it's still the idea is there will be no longer an assessment on that donation, and we need to be made as whole as we can, sort of
Right.
tangential. It's hard to say because the formula usually only concentrates on one property at a time, but that would be collateral evidence, I think, that could come in. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The last one, Mr. Adams, that we did was with IRMC, and they took over some pieces of property that were in the past taxed, and now they're not. And they basically came back and said, look, we don't, it's kind of, I don't want to say there's a whole lot of negotiations because it's really one-sided, and that the entity that you're negotiating with really is kind of giving up an olive branch to say, look, we understand by us doing this, by making these properties non-taxable, we are hurting you, we're hurting the county, we're hurting the municipality if they're a taxing municipality. So we're willing to help you out and continue to pay something. We're not going to maybe not pay the millage rate on it, but we're willing to give you something. And the last time I think White Township, which doesn't have property taxes, but the county, we negotiated with IRMC. They basically set an amount, and then we decided how we would divide that up. So,
Okay.
It's not really negotiations because they could do whatever they really wanted.
Right.
There's leverage.
Now, like with IRMC now building that new mental health building, is that taxable once it opens? Or is that something they're going to say, we'll give you this in lieu of? It
depends. If they are running it on their own and it's their doctors and all their people in it, then it's part of their nonprofit entity. They had a couple buildings prior to, and you see a lot of hospitals doing it, where they were like renting out spaces to doctors who were on their own.
Yeah.
And because they were renting that, it was more of a business type building. That building was taxable. But as they started to kind of take more doctors under their umbrella, and then those buildings became just a normal part of their operations, the buildings became non-taxable because they're non-for-profit.
And I think we've seen some anomalies too, Jared, over at the Robert Shaw building and the new dormitories they built, 20 years ago or 15 years ago. A lot of it has to do with who actually owns the building, and that impacts whether it's taxable or not taxable.
Yep. Some of those are not technically owned by IUP. I forget.
They're owned by the foundation.
Yes, by the foundation. Yes.
Mm.
And they're used for kind of a business-like type activity.
So Chris, the point is that it can be somewhat complicated and convoluted. It's not necessarily a straight line type of a situation on some of these.
That's really helpful. I appreciate that. It helps me understand it a lot more.
Jared, for next year, from some of these big items that we have, do you have any idea? I think you did say a couple months ago, weeks ago, where you thought our healthcare costs would go. How much of it?
We are the consortium. Nothing's final until May when we meet. But right now we have a 9% increase budgeted for our healthcare. That's the most it could be. Now, if we, the next couple of months, have some pretty amazing months where our claims are low, as a consortium, not as a district, as a whole, we are part of the consortium. You could see that maybe drop a little bit, but I don't foresee that happening. I fully expect that to be 9%.
Is there a floor on that? Do you have a ceiling? Is there a floor?
We don't have a floor, no. I can tell you ours, there may be one or two other districts in the consortium, but ours is the lowest. Because we kind of set, here's the medium, and districts based on their actual claims can fluctuate from that medium. And we're at the lowest of anybody in the consortium can get. There may be a couple other districts at that rate, but based on our actual claims, knock on wood, we are at the lowest for the consortium.
Knock on wood. Yeah. So we're budgeting still at 0%.
0% tax increase. I mean,
In preparation for April, maybe you can give us, when we have this workshop type of meeting, if you could give us an idea of relative to the, what do you call it, the index, where we can go and what that would raise. So we
Yep.
start to get, and maybe get that to us week before, 2 weeks, soon, you know.
I can
middle of
send
the
it to you right now. I have it
Okay,
ready.
good. Okay, good. Okay, anybody else have anything to ask about this? Please do so soon.
I think one of the big things, especially on the revenue side, is ESSERs. I have no ESSER money budgeted for 24-25. I mean, we have until, my projections, the majority of it will be gone by the end of this school year. And that's how it should be. I mean, we have until September 30th of this year to spend it. But everything we have been spending it on should be wrapped up by the end of this year. There might be a little bit of carryover, depending where everything falls out. But I have no money, no ESSER funds budgeted for 24-25.
So I'm assuming that this current projection that you just gave us included the projected state adder based on the lawsuit, or does it not include that?
It does not include anything from that. And for Indiana, from some of the projections I saw, the most we are supposed to get is $600,000, and that could be over a course of 7 years that they make that up. So as far as, you know, we're concerned, I don't think that has a huge impact on our budget. It does include a $200,000 increase in basic ed, which is what the governor and his proposal back in February proposed, you know, some money going into the basic ed formula outside of the lawsuit. For Indiana, it was $400,000. So trying to be a little bit conservative on that because we never seem to get that total amount. I put in $200,000 in basic ed and some for special ed as well.
And then one of the things that I think, particularly if we start to look at some sort of a tax increase, and you kind of touched on this in your earlier comments, how much has the assessed value actually declined since 2017, 2018, 2020, pick a number, I don't care. And how much has that actual revenue to us declined? So we can kind of look at both of those numbers, because it sounds like it's been doing that all along.
Yep.
Maybe as some this year already, but
No, I think we had information like that last year.
I think it was around $1 million we lost in revenue, and
I can update that.
how much the assessed value dropped. Yeah, I think we need to.
And, you know, at some point, whether that affects our leverage ratio.
I mean, in some ways, it's, you know, if we had some of that, if we had that revenue back that we didn't lose through those changes in the assessments, we wouldn't be in nearly this, you know, fix that you're projecting here at 6 million. And the irony for me is now we're going to go back to every taxpayer, including those, the mom and pops, and say, you got to pony up because these other taxes went away. And we need to be able to justify that and say, here's why.
Yep.
Part of this has got to happen this way.
It's become a tougher game.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this matter?
No, I just included, this is the budget projection. The second budget projection here is the one back from June when we passed our 23-24. The reason why I provided that to you is I wanted the board to see back in June, the budget projection for 24-25 was a $6,050,000 loss. So we're not far off from where we thought we were back in June. And I haven't changed these numbers. You can go back and look at the budget projection from back then, but we're pretty much right where we thought we were going to be even almost 9 months ago. So.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about the ESSER funded item. You have literacy, insurance, speech, all these different ESSER funded, the mental health. We did the one with Sue and the literacy insurance at her committee. Building subs, psych graduates. So you go ahead and talk about this, please.
Yeah, I think one of your questions, Madam Vice President, that you had sent that you wanted on here were things that we were funding out of ESSERS. This year, these are really the big things. I mean, we've done some curriculum this year. We had some summer school expense from a little bit from last year. But these are really the big ticket items that have been funded through ESSERS for the last couple years. Some of these are new to the district when the COVID money, ESSER money came in. The literacy interns is something we were doing well before COVID. But I wanted to provide this list you asked for. These are things, none of these are actual people that we hire. These are all contracted out either through IUP or through other outside agencies. But it is a pretty significant total that we have been funding every year with ESSERS. And again, that money is now going away for 24-25. So these will switch from being, if you choose to continue them, would have to come from somewhere else.
So that's our nut. That's the nut we have to crack.
Yes, ma'am.
Because there's every one of these you found to have, you've been able to demonstrate.
Oh, yeah. We wouldn't
That
bring them
they've
to you if
helped.
they didn't have value. You know, a lot of these things, the literacy interns was a well-established program long before ESSERS was paying for it. The speech interns have had incredible data with our youngest, and they're providing interventions at the 4 or 5 buildings. The mental health workers, I mean, we're in the middle of a mental health crisis that everyone across the nation is recognizing. So those mental health workers provide targeted behavior interventions in our elementary schools and middle school. So the building subs is something we have to talk about sooner rather than later, because we have to work on an MOU with the association, whether or not we can continue that. And we have to do that by rule by the end of this year. So we need to know if it's even an option for us to continue to pay for that moving forward before we get into negotiations with them. The site graduate assistants have been, outstanding additions as well. And in the summer camp, obviously, we talked about the value it brings, for the last 4 years. So, I mean, all of these have value that'd be difficult to cut or to, reallocate our money somewhere else. But there is something that we have to take a good hard look at how we're going to fund moving forward, because the money that we have been using is just not going to be there next year.
With the building subs, elementary, you have less rooms, but I know the secondary, and there's times at the high school, you have 4 or 5 people that have no subs, and you're sending one sub into an auditorium or an LGI with 100 kids or more. And I think to put them in a large area like that, how do you do any teaching? I mean, you don't do any teaching. You're just basically sitting there.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, I think we have to look at the secondary buildings to try to maintain those too. But it's bad at the elementaries, but they don't have the number of teachers.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You'd probably make an argument either way. I agree with you. The secondary level, when there's a better statistical chance you're going to have more teachers out than you can handle, for sure. The elementary buildings, though, if we have a teacher out, you have to have someone in there, whereas teachers at the high school can cover each other's classes a little bit more. So it's tough. There's something that we would want to maintain, if at all possible, everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they have significant value. I think the principal's out here shaking her head, yes.
And I know a lot of districts have gone to that now. They have a permanent sub in their buildings just because of the shortage of teachers.
For sure.
And it's, when I hear stories about 5 classes in an auditorium or an LGI with one sub, you're asking for trouble.
For sure. Absolutely.
And I know it's the same with elementary.
Yeah, because if we don't have if I don't have a sub, then I'd have to pull my special ed teacher, or I'd have to pull a reading specialist or someone like that for the day, because somebody has to be in the room with those children. And we can't piecemeal it together at an elementary school because they're all in their rooms, kind of thing. So we're pulling from those services. So then we don't have reading specialists that day. We don't have special ed services. We don't have. So if I don't have that building sub, and I would say I use my building sub probably 3 or 4 times a week. And if I don't use my sub, I'm sending it to East Pike, or I'm sending it to Ben Franklin to help cover. And Kelly and Don will tell you, we share amongst us all.
They did a nice job, and although it is a very expensive item, when you think about it, it's the cost of one permanent teacher effectively. So, to get 6 people full bodied, I mean, it's almost, it's almost a no-brainer, but it's still $150,000. We have to figure out where it's coming from. So it's something that we have to have a real serious, like you said, it's a nut to crack, because each and every one of these programs has added value somewhere. And if we have to reallocate the money and not be able to fund these initiatives, we're going to feel it in one way or another. So.
And I'd like to. I know other county schools. They don't have as much of a problem. They're not as big as Indiana, but it seems like subs are taking sub opportunities at other school districts surrounding us, and like Indiana's like their last ditch that they're going to go to.
Really?
So I don't know. I'd like to find out more reasons why.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
We're paying them more now?
We do pay more than the other districts, so
We're paying more.
I don't know.
But what do we technically hold a sub to? The same working day as the teacher, or?
Correct, yeah, the same working day.
Because in Indiana it's 8 hours, and there's other districts only 7 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And if they're getting paid comparable, that could be one of the reasons too.
At the secondary level, do they hold them after the kids are gone?
You don't hold them up.
I don't think so. I think they just let them go.
So there's probably
There's
maybe a
nothing further.
7.5 hour day there, but at the elementaries, my guess is they're probably walking in at the door at 8 o'clock. And
Well, elementary, basically the buses leave and the teachers are pretty
Yeah,
close to
right
that.
after that.
Well, except for Eisenhower, because Eisenhower's on the different schedule.
Yeah.
We go from 3:30 to 4:05 is our meetings then.
Yeah.
So I typically let the subs go at Eisenhower.
Okay.
The other ones, you're right, it's within 5, 10, 15 minutes, yeah.
Chris, any questions?
No.
The other item that I'm always concerned about, and it relates to the non-agenda item number 1 on the budget, is where you're projecting security costs. What have you how much that's going to go up?
I've been,
I'll have to sit down and really study this, but
I've
I know
been
we're doing work and
included
all, but we just finished a project.
as far as like building security, or do you mean like security guards and that type of
Building security.
like cameras and stuff like that? That's not included in the general fund budget. Anything that we do with that is paid out of the capital reserve.
And what have you reserved for it for next year? Do you have any idea?
We haven't covered that
I
yet.
haven't covered that.
I think though, it might be, especially for the next meeting, Jared, to have, I'm gonna re-ask Julia's question from an operational point of view. What are the costs, in total for the security guards, the arrangements with the borough? Or, I don't know whether you have a separate line item for security in your accounts there.
I do. It's not in the summary
It's not in
here.
this one here.
But I think
No, I have it up breakdown.
because that's certainly something that we've increased that cost, obviously for very good reasons, but it's also adding to our dilemma.
Can we check, and I know, Rob, I mentioned this to you back right after December, January. Can we check, because I know other school districts around us are using the companies that they have their security with to do their risk assessments, because it's part of the package. I think we're paying Giddings, now we're paying Fatula, but I believe it's part of the package what we are paying the group that we have our security guards out of. They would do that at no additional cost because that's part of what they do. So, I don't know what we pay for Tula right now, if it's $30,000 or whatever, but 25, 30, but I know other districts, the security company that they're using, that they provide that risk assessment as part of their package.
No, I know they have come forward to say that they can do that, but I'm not sure whether they meant it's either included or we can do it on top of what we're already providing.
Okay.
So, but no, I can ask that question.
Yeah, it's a burgeoning expense every year, so we have to, and that's not one we can put off. Okay, repurposing of Horseman. Jared, you're up again.
Yes, this is an item that we've added to every committee. as we're working through the process with strategy solutions. We just wanted to remind everybody the open house is next week, next Tuesday, from 3 to 7. We will be, sounds like from Jackie at Strategy Solutions that she's been getting some responses as part of her marketing. People, sounds like they're going to come, different companies, different people interested in buying the building or doing something with the building, partnering with us if that's the way we go. One of the questions she has been getting is, do we have an asking price? And I kind of told her that that's not necessarily the way schools operate. We don't really set an asking price. The easiest and proper way for a school district to get it is to kind of collect closed bids, and the highest bidder gets it. No, we can set a minimum. We're not going to get rid of it if the highest bid is $10,000 or something. But we really can't give out an asking price. We did have it appraised back in 2016, is what I told her is the closest price, and it was $600,000 as a school building, and then it went down to like $300,000 it appraised for if you were just to sell it for some other use, if it was to be rezoned, is exactly how they put it in there. So I kind of gave that to her as a roundabout figure. If somebody were to come in and, I don't know why we would take less than appraisal for it unless we really just wanted to get rid of it. But we can't in material say, here's our asking price, and if you give it to us, we'll sell it to you, because we can't do that.
That was 8 years ago. Should we have another appraisal then?
I think when we get to that point, we certainly would, if the board wants to say, look, we're going to put this out to bid, and here's the bottom figure that we're absolutely not going to go below.
But that might be something I think we should kind of know at the beginning of the process now of what is the appraisal, the most current appraisal.
Yeah,
So that way it can be part of the discussion. Okay, we know it's 600,000 8 years ago. So, but what is the current appraisal?
There was,
How much does an appraisal cost?
For this, good bit.
Couple $1,000s.
but Doug, that was
And then
two different numbers. The 600 was if it was kept as a school,
Well, you can, that's the-
and then the
325
if
or
it was.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it was a little more than 300, but was if it was for some other purpose other than the school. I agree. I think we probably should get a more updated appraisal, but I also think that, if I'm not mistaken, there are certain other rules that kind of come into play here, where if we do have an appraiser, there's appraisal value, we can't really sell it below that unless the court approves. I'm not certain on that, but there was something I recall about the court might have to approve certain sales. So that
I think if it's below a certain, so much below the appraisal or market price or something like that.
well, anyway, we ought to try to get that figured out too.
If we wouldn't get rid of it through the normal bid process and open bids and equal opportunity for everybody, and at the end of the day, somebody would come in and say, I'll give you $300,000 for it, then the court needs to approve that.
Okay.
That's right.
Because you're selling it to an individual, they want to make sure it's for fair market value, or there's reasons why it's not.
Say that again, Jared. I was thinking of something else. What did you just say?
If we would happen, let's say we put it out to bid and nobody bids it and nobody wants it, and then somebody comes in afterwards who didn't go through the bidding process and says, well, hey, I'll give you $200,000 and take it off your hands. The court, we can't just issue a sale and go through that process. We would have to get the court to approve the sale at that point.
That makes sense. Okay. All righty. So I hope everybody can stop by the open house on April 2nd, 3 to 7, correct? So we'll announce that again tonight.
Yes, ma'am. It's part of my report to the board, and then and also anyone that you want to invite, please feel free to do that. I know that several board members have been approached by people that are interested. Make sure that they, everybody that comes your way, just point them in that direction.
Exactly.
But before we,
Okay.
we kind of covered part of C1, but C2, square footage cost to rent lease.
That is just something that Jackie towards the end of last week kind of thought of was if, you are looking at possibly, if the district's looking at keeping the building and maybe renting space out, we need to start thinking about what would be a reasonable square footage cost. I'm not in the rental business, but I'm assuming that is something that commercial properties look at when they're.
So
Chris can
if we're
help us
gonna
with
do
that.
this appraisal,
That
could
should
we
be,
get,
you could get that.
could we get that included in the proposal to the appraiser companies to include a rental for either school use or non-school use?
Maybe what I can
The
do is
commercial lenders have a good idea of what the going rate is in this region. So maybe Chris could tell us, at least get a point of view of if you looked at it as a commercial space, what you could lease it for in the condition it's in.
Yeah, but can we do a lease or rent as a commercial if it's zone P1?
Well, that's an issue.
I mean,
But still, Chris, you might be
You
able
mean
to tell us.
I thought it's
Yeah.
P1 for public education. Maybe I
Well,
thought,
R1 is what surrounds it.
R1s, yes, but
but I thought
think he's right. I
P1
think
is
it's P1 is that space.
P1 is that space,
the
that building.
borough, the prior council had said they weren't going to change that, but now there's a different council and we don't know. And they're looking to, and they've been very amenable, so I'm not so sure that that's still fixed in stone. But I do know that we can get a pretty good idea from the Tri-County area, from the commercial lending department, either S&T or First Commonwealth or even FNB, they can tell you what that number's going to be.
And I think it could get a little complicated because it could be that Aaron or ICTC would each rent a part of it, which would still fall under the P1, okay? But maybe a top floor would be something, maybe a private entity of some sort renting it, maybe for school or for something
Yes,
else.
I think then you have to change the whole, I mean, as long as it's P1, all of it has to be that's what I've been told if it stays that way. Because I was talking to a group from Punxsutawney that they have those old buildings that they sold individually and they made it senior living and on the tax rolls and all that, but they were talking about at one time leasing and they said it all had to be to keep it the P1 zone, whatever zoning for public education, it all had to be dealing with education.
I think you might be able to get a variance. I don't know. We could look into that. I don't know that that's exactly it.
Well, if it is ICTC and Aaron and partners like that, it would be right.
Well, Walter said then if the top would be a private industry.
It also
could
could
work
be
out.
one of these other, like, private schools that does, like,
Marikey or something.
Marikey or something like that could lease it. It would still be educational, but it would be a private individual rather than a public.
We can look into it, we'll find out.
What
We'll find the answers.
what about agencies, like the guidance center or any agency like that? Would they be
I
considered?
don't know. That's a very good question. I can call the
They're
borough and
awesome.
find out and see what this,
I'm just curious. I don't know.
they're all good questions. We gotta find out. So we're getting an appraiser to send us a quote for those two items. We'll check with the borough about the zoning, whether or not,
What can all go in there? Or even if it's leased out, what can you mix and match?
right, even if we're still the owner
Yeah.
and it's technically public school, can we lease it to other people? Yeah.
The borough manager reached out to us the night of the hearing and she was very, and so
She'd be
they,
great.
she can talk to their solicitor and he can talk to ours. So I think that
Yes,
that's maybe the best way.
Yeah, and they've
Okay.
been very, like you said, they're
They've
willing to
been
work
very,
with us, find solutions. So.
It's been a very nice attitude they've adopted. So we have 15 minutes left before we have to start executive. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Julie, I was going to say too, not only can the bank, the real estate departments help, but we should also kind of pull close with some of our IRE or our real estate friends in town so we can understand what they're seeing out there as well.
Okay, I caught most of that. Yeah, absolutely. All those, I mean, we need to use all the resources we can, especially if they're willing to work with us without fees. We'll see, maybe donate a fee. It's now 6:15 and, we have an executive session coming up in 15 minutes. I'm going to move this around a little bit. First, I want to put the athletic budget last if we have time. I want to go to junior high roof restoration discussion. And I'll just say about that, I'll lead off on that I was buildings and grounds last week, right? And we had a very interesting conversation about whether or not that roof actually needs replaced, coupled with an opportunity. that these fellows from Tremco came in and talked to us about. I thought it was interesting. The discussion started on this one motion for buildings and grounds, which I think I'll probably handle tonight because I don't think Tom's here.
I don't, whether he's still on vacation
I
or
don't
not.
know. So, about these roofs, and these gentlemen had a lot to say about this junior high roof, and they did indicate it, they don't think it needs to be replaced. And you indicated for about half the price almost that we could apply for a grant. So if you could just brief the committee briefly on that.
Yeah, John Tremco, who was the company who was here last week, has been on the roof, has done infrared scans of the roof, has patched up a couple different spots free of charge to us right now. But they fully feel that it is not at the point where it needs replaced, that it still has some life in it and can be restored at this point for almost half the cost. So what we are doing, and they are working very closely with me, is back as part of the final budget approvals in December, there was grant funding approved through the Department of Community and Economic Development. And part of that were grants strictly for school facilities, roofs, mechanical systems, those type of things are what they're looking for. So we are going to put in for a grant, and I think when talking with them, they're going to help get 3 different quotes for, what would it look like to restore it, what would it look like to a full replacement, because I think that's an important piece to show them is, look, we're actually saving a good bit of money. We're saving the taxpayers a good bit of money, and also highlighting kind of the environmental side of that we're not tearing all the stuff off that's going to go into a landfill, that we're actually keeping it all there. We're using it for another. This restoration would provide a 20-year warranty. So the roof, what is there is going to stay for
20 or 30, because I thought I heard them say something about 30.
I think it can vary depending on how thick you want to make that. So they're going to give us price,
Right.
but at least up to 20. I mean, 20 is their minimum. Depending on where you want to go with it, it can be up to 30. But the grant would pay for 75% of the cost to restore it.
And it can be phased in. We don't have to do it all in one year. Correct? He said you could do it over a phased period.
He said you could do that. Now, if you're going to get the grant funding, there's going to be timelines that you have to follow with the grant that probably would not allow us to
And you'll
phase
let
it.
us know.
I think what he was getting at, Julia, was if was it about $1 million to do the roof, this restoration?
About 1.2.
1.2.
Okay, so if we got 800,000 in the grant,
Yeah.
then that would be enough to do the whole roof. But like everything else, that pot may not be that big, and so maybe what happens if we only get 400,000? Then then you maybe would do half the roof now and then half the roof later, or the board could vote to do the whole thing. But his point was you had the option of maybe doing a smaller project based on the
Yes.
amount that the
Yeah,
grant
you're
came
right. You
up with.
said that better than I did. The reason why I've been thinking about this is because I think it does hook in with the number 6 on the agenda, the capital reserve list, or the capital project list. We said at Buildings and Grounds that we're happy that you're creating an evolution for that list, so that we get more precise as we run out of ESSER monies as the tax base declines. But we are very careful about what's getting a number 1, what is something we want a new category called a 0, what we suggested number 2s, and how long are they on this list when they're not getting done, and now we have a number 2 or 3 of the junior high roof. That's not a number 1, and yet we could be looking at an expenditure assuming we get a full amount of the grant. Now, the reason I think it's important is I think on those reserves that we hold for capital projects, we've got to start developing a loose, not a policy, but guidelines. And the suggestions I made, and I wanted the committee to hear this, the suggestions that I made are that if a special opportunity comes along, that you get points for that. So this is that can be a reason that the board might decide to bump the line item up to the top of the list. Another might be for the cost in relationship to how many students it's benefiting. It may be about immediate need. There's all kinds of factors we could plug in, but what I was seeing happen a little bit at the Buildings and Grounds, I'm now on that committee, was that people come up, this is a great idea. This is something we need to talk about, and, you know, somebody that wants to move it to number one. I think it should have to come through this committee and we decide if it's appropriate for number one. Not that the committee wants to block things, but the committee's charge is a little different from the other committees. We have to see they've got money. We're kind of, the board as a whole, its main job as a board is it's in its fiduciary capacity. It guarantees the solvency of the district. So I would like for this April meeting, when we do the budget workshop, that we could have your guidelines for us about how you want to do this and show us before the meeting a draft of what we can look forward to. And there was going to be that zero item, I forget what, recurring, right?
Yeah.
He's got it. He actually laid it out this time, Julia.
Where'd you?
It was in that packet at the very bottom of the finance packet.
Oh, yeah, I did see
was
this.
great.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I
This was
forgot.
great. So it adds a little more clarity so we can actually think about where we need to spend our time on.
And I have started reaching out to HASBO, which is our statewide organization, and also some other business managers to see if anybody has kind of that evaluation system we're looking for, as far as here's the program or the project we're looking at. Can we run it through here to kind of where do we add it, to create that number as to where we add it to our list here.
I mean, an example would be that junior high pool. It basically was down for most of the year up until like a month ago. I mean, that's something, and it's always on this list. It's something I think the board has to decide. We can continually put money into it, or are we going to repurpose it for something else?
We had a big meeting about that before the election when you guys were brought on the board. You were here. Yeah. And so we did, I don't think we have time to talk about it tonight,
Yeah.
but maybe Jared can fill you in
That's
on
fine,
what was
yeah.
decided. But these recurring, I thought you were gonna have a zero. A zero category.
He broke it out, Julia, in the category down at the very bottom of page one, the front page down there at the bottom. Projects, items approved on an ongoing
Are
basis.
those recurring?
Yes.
Those would be things that,
Well,
yes, don't need that
So,
carpeting, desks, those things that are part of capital reserve that we don't come back to the board every time we want to purchase.
and you're not gonna put an R by them or anything like that? I mean, didn't we say we wanted them
Oh,
specific?
yeah, well, you mean the priority level,
Yeah.
just change it from a 1 or a 2 to an R.
Yeah, I'd like one, and I'd like the numbers to be 1, 2, and 3 as we've done it before, but we wanted that special category of,
No, and I probably should
am I
have
making sense?
deleted the 1s and the 2s in that first box because they're on. I mean, I can put an R or something in there.
Okay, so I can take my pencil and go like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're gonna call those
Or
Rs.
just eliminate the priority list if they are something that's going on an ongoing basis.
Ongoing, yep.
Okay, so our priority list is 520, our R list is $525,000. Okay, any questions about this?
Jared, can I stop in on Thursday and pick up copies of this?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome, man.
I think we're getting better at this, and I'm pleased. Thank you, Jared. I'm
Chris,
pleased.
Chris, do you want them emailed to you, or do you just
They're
want?
emailed. I think they're
on the
emailed.
site, I think.
They're on the site.
All the attachments are attached to the
To the agenda.
agenda, but I mean, I have extra packets too, Mr. Adams, if you want to stop.
Okay.
and grab.
No, that's what. No, I've been looking at them online, but yeah, I guess I could print them out, right? But
Either way, Chris.
okay.
Thank you. We had a quick question before we adjourn, we had a quick question for Quinn about
Oh, the
the
library.
library. What was that question? I forget.
If all the districts, is it just Indiana School District that gives to the, or is it like Homer Center and Penns
To
Manor?
my knowledge, it's just us.
Just Indiana.
To my-
So it's, and White Township and the borough are putting.
Yes, yes. And I just got all the packets because I went to orientation, so I have to look through where all the funding
Okay.
sources are, so.
Okay, good, thank you. All righty, so then we have the athletic budget, and we've got 5 minutes left. Do you want to get us started on it?
Go.
I mean, what I provided, to you is basically the sheets that I use for budgeting purposes for both the junior high and senior high athletic budget. It shows you a history, the past 3 years that are complete of the actual expenditures. It shows you the 23-24 budget, and then right now what is proposed in your 24-25 budget. And then at the bottom of each of those pages, it does total everything as to how much was actually spent as a whole, but it also breaks it down by the different categories as well. I'm not sure, Madam Vice President, what exactly you were looking for.
No, let's look at this for the next meeting, or we can email questions to Jared, take a look at it.
Well, one thing I think we need to look at too is, I'm just gonna use the example of baseball. They're not even allotted enough money to buy enough baseballs or their hats that they have to wear during the season. I mean, I think we need to look at least what the bare minimums of each of these sports, like you can't play baseball without baseball. So, I mean, baseballs now are $90 a dozen just for the high, and you have to use a specific type. So I think we need to look at the sport and find out what's the bare minimum that they need for the season. Like baseball hats are over $2,200 between JV and varsity, and they have no other money to do. That's where.
And I think it's where our booster groups make up the difference.
Who the boosters? The taxpayers. So in reality, they keep on getting. I think I gave like $3,000 last year for my business to boosters in the school district. And I mean, but I think
deduction.
I understand that, but I think the bare minimum, baseballs and a hat needs to be paid by the district, because that's, I can see if they want bats, the better bats, they get their own bats or whatever, cleats and all that, but at least baseball, and that's just an example. I'm sure there's other things in other sports that.
We've tried to be generous in the past few years. We've been trying to get this straight. And I do think this is one of the subjects that's caused the foundation discussion to become more front and center.
No, I know, but the money that's been given out in the last couple of years are those that we don't fully fund to begin with. So, I mean, sometimes we need to worry about what we're fully funding over the last 50 years and go.
They come forward to us, and Jared goes over that with us with the committee now. So we did have the track and field people come in wanting this and that, or they go to the athletic director.
Is this something that Dan has been directed. He's working on a projection for each team as far as what we need. We're trying to keep surprises like the track and field mats from happening, projected list that, so he can assess all the equipment we have and what's going to need to be updated. There's certain things that have to be upgraded every year. And there's things that might not have to be updated every 10 years, but he's going to bring that to us so that we can make intelligent decisions about where to spend the money now versus down the road. So I can make sure that that's ready for the next meeting.
When do you think we'll see that?
I can make it for the next meeting. I mean, he's been working on it for a while, so. We can
Well,
get
maybe we better reserve more than an hour for our next meeting. What do you say, Jared?
Yeah, next one. Yeah,
I
next.
think we better get adjourned now. So if there's anything for the good of the order? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. And that's-